Well, good evening. We are back to the study of the Spirit's book. We started a couple of weeks ago, book 4 of the Spirit's book, which is Hopes and Consolations. The first item is Earthly Joys and Sorrows, and we haven't finished yet the first item, which is Relative Happiness and Unhappiness. We have one question left, which is question 933. And just as a recap, we are here on a planet of trials and atonements, and we can achieve relative happiness here on this planet according to our moral and intellectual evolution and our acceptance of the reality of us as eternal spirits and as a journey that we have to face. So we talked about physical pain, about moral pain, and this question, the last question, which is a pretty long one, is going to cover a little bit of both. Okay, so Philip, please.
933. People are often the architects of their own physical suffering. Are they the architects of their moral suffering as well? Even more so, because material suffering is sometimes independent of their will. However, wounded pride, disappointed ambition, the anxieties of greed, envy, jealousy, and all the passions are the torments of the soul. Envy and jealousy. Blessed are those who do not know these two gnawing worms. Where envy and jealousy exist, there can be no calm or tranquility. These passions torment anyone who is a slave to them, even in their sleep. The envious and jealous are always agitated. Is such a state desirable? Do you not understand that you create the most terrible tortures with such passions, and that earth then truly becomes a hell for you? Many expressions paint vivid pictures of the effects of different passions. They say, bursting with pride, dying of envy, consumed by jealousy, and so on. Expressions that are very true. Sometimes even jealousy has no fixed object. There are individuals who are naturally jealous of anyone who rises, everything that is out of the ordinary, even when their own interests are in no way concerned, simply because they are not able to achieve a similar success. Everything that seems to be above the common horizon offends them, and if they form the majority of society, if possible, they would want to bring everyone down to their level. It is jealousy attached to mediocrity. Much of the unhappiness people feel is a result of the undue importance they attach to the things of this world. Vanity, ambition, and greed make up a huge part of their misfortunes. If people place their goals beyond the narrow circle of physical life, raising their thoughts towards an infinite that is their destiny, then the difficulties of human life seem petty and foolish, like a broken toy over which a child weeps inconsolably. Those who find their happiness only in the satisfaction of pride and gross material passions are unhappy when they cannot satisfy them. However, those who ask for no luxuries are happy under circumstances that others perceive as dire. We are talking about civilized people because primitive people do not have the same inclinations to envy and anxiety, since they have fewer wants. Their want of looking at things is altogether different. In the civilized state, people analyze unhappiness and are affected by them even more painfully. However, they may also analyze the means of consolation within their grasp. Christianity provides solace by giving them hope of a better future, and by Spiritism that provides the certainty of that future.
Okay, so when we talk about moral suffering, we know that physical suffering, it's something that we have to face during our incarnation, because our physical body decays. And by decaying, we are going to have some issues with our body that are inevitable, right? Some people have more than others. Some people go through diseases that are part of their karma, part of their necessities of that they have to go through. Some of them caused by their own actions, right? You can cause your own diseases by not taking good care of your physical body. But the moral suffering, that's 100% our own construction as eternal spirits, right? Things that are part of our imperfections that we need to overcome. The spirits give examples here of envy and jealousy, right? All these inferior tendencies that we have are the cause of moral suffering. Because if we are envy of someone else, who are we harming? We're not harming the person we are envy of. For that person, they may not even be aware of our envy, but we are hurting ourselves, right? Because of our lack of acceptance with our possessions and our limitations. So we are causing our own moral suffering. When we are jealous, right? The object of our jealousy, sometimes it's not even aware of it, or sometimes is, and it can cause problems for us. But who is the main victim of jealousy, right? The person who feels jealous, right? The person that is going to suffer, because we're not going to discuss if it's the sentiment has a reason for it or not, because sometimes it has, sometimes it's just our own creations, right? But regardless, who's going to suffer? We are, right? So the spirits tells us here, these are two gnawing worms. Where envy and jealousies exist, there can be no calm or tranquility. That's very true and very powerful. And we all know that. That's the problem. We know that. But we struggle to overcome, to control, to eliminate those imperfections that we have. And again, they give two examples here, but there are other examples, right, of imperfections that we have. You know, you are, a simple example. You are on a line to do something, let's say in a shop to buy something, and you lose your patience because you have no patience to be in line. Who's suffering? Nobody else in the shop cares that you are impatient with waiting in line. You are the one causing all your suffering. It's a simple example, but it shows how we cause harm to ourselves, how we cause moral suffering to ourselves because of our own imperfection. And how can we overcome these imperfections, it's a work. We have to work on it, right? You're not going to become patient from one day to another. You have to exercise patience. You have to face the challenges, because it's very easy to be patient when there's nothing to make you lose your patience, right? But for a lot of us who lose our patience when driving, right? That's a very good exercise of learning how to be patient, right? Because it's one thing that makes us lose our patience very quickly. If we are envy of someone, right? How do we address that? We have to address our own feelings. Why are we envy, right? You go to study Joana de Angelis, psychological series of Joana de Angelis, right? The greatest psychologist we have available to us. And you are not going to overcome if you don't find the root of it, right? You have envy because something is not right inside of you, right? And you need to address that. Our moral suffering is a result of our imperfections that we need to work on that. Kardec then talks about goes on and discusses about people that feel jealous, people that they are jealous of everyone. There are people that are unhappy with their own lives. So anyone else looks better than them. So they are jealous of the world. Who's suffering? The world is not suffering because you are jealous of the world, right? You are suffering. It's funny because they give these expressions here: bursting with pride, dying on envy, consumed by jealousy. So I said, well, these are expressions. Let me go to the French one to see what expressions they used on the original one. And of course, has nothing to do with it. But you cannot translate the expression in French. It's the same type of expression. So it's because you translate the expression, it loses. It's not an expression in English, right? In Portuguese, dying of envy, for instance, in Portuguese is the same, right? But there is not, in the original, I don't think there is this expression. Anyway, the key for our moral evolution is to overcome our imperfections, is to fight our imperfections. And again, the problem for most of us is that we have many of them and we feel bad because we are aware of them and we want to fix everything at the same time. And that's not the best way to fight them, because you are going to get frustrated and it's impossible. We need to work in small steps. Start by the ones that we can address, right? Each one of us has a different one that it's an imperfection, but it's not something that really affects us that much and that we can address if we really want. So if we start by these ones, that's the way we are going to work on building our moral improvement, right? Again, some people will attack the more difficult ones. That's fine, as long as you don't attack all of them at the same time, because we're not going to become perfect spirits in one incarnation. And we are going to get frustrated if we try to fight all of them at the same time, and we end up like those people that say, I'm like this, I'm never going to change, which is not true. Everybody's going to change, right? One constant is change. But if you just give up, it's only going to make things more difficult, right? We need to find, Spiritism helps us find our objective, our target, looking at ourselves as eternal spirits, looking at ourselves with a more ample view of our existence that should help us feel less frustrated by the small things that happen on our daily lives, and even the bigger things that happens to us, we can use Spiritism to find resignation and, or Spaco here, no, active resignation and acceptance to the challenges that come our way, right? It's not easy. If it was easy, we wouldn't be in perfect spirits, we wouldn't be here. It's hard, but we have to start. And it's on each one of us to start, right? You work on your, why are you envy of this or that group of people, right? You need to analyze yourself, find the reasons, find why you are unhappy with that particular area of your personality and address it, right? Because, you know, you are envy of people that have a better car than you, right? Why do you need a better car? Things like that, right? Small things, but that's what people are normally envy of, right? And it's all of this is, we can deal with it if we decide to address it. The problem is that we keep postponing it. We keep leaving it for next incarnation, or, you know, like Renato used to say, we have eternity ahead of us, so I'll deal with it later. The problem is the longer we postpone, once we are aware of it, it becomes more difficult for us. Because we have some imperfections that we're not even aware. Fine, we cannot deal with things that we are not aware we don't have. We have problems we're not aware we have. But the ones that we are aware, the more we postpone dealing with them, they will come back more difficult to us, because they will be more challenging for us to deal in our future existences. Okay? Any questions here? Okay, we are done with relative happiness and unhappiness. If anyone has any final comments or questions, the next item is a difficult one, but one that you know, it's very important always to discuss, especially because Spiritism has a view that is not similar to most of the other beliefs and religions that are out there, which is the loss of loved ones. Okay.
934. Is the loss of those who are dear to us a legitimate source of sorrow, as this loss is both irreparable and independent of our will? This cause of sorrow, from which neither the rich nor the poor are safe, is either a trial or an atonement. However, you have the consolation of communicating with them through the means you already possess, while awaiting other means that will be more direct and more open to your senses.
So first thing the spirits are saying to us here is that everybody goes through the loss of loved ones, right? Unless you die at a young age, right? You die as a child and you never experience the loss of a loved one because you live before all of them. So, of course, there is always exceptions. But let's say everyone that lives a life of an average age, right, that lives up to be 50, 70, 30, 50, 70, is going to experience a loss of a loved one. That can be a close one, some difficult losses, or, you know, losses that are natural, right? It's natural for us to experiment the loss of our parents, for instance, right? The natural law is for our parents to go before us. The other way around is what's not natural and it's more difficult. Normally, children first experiment the loss of loved ones with their grandparents, right? Normally, they lose grandparents in their early age or a little bit later. So what Spiritism brings to us are two things: the understanding of us as eternal spirits, so we are not really losing anyone. That's very important for us. We need to first convince ourselves as we become more aware of what Spiritism teaches us, that we never lose the ones we love, right? We face a temporary separation. And again, temporary. We are eternal beings. So the temporary could be a very long temporary, right? Because we may go back to the spiritual world and they may have already reincarnated, or we may be at different levels, in different levels at the spiritual world. But our loved ones, really loved ones, right? We are never going to lose it. So it's the first thing that we need to remove from our vocabulary as spiritists. It's not the loss of loved ones, it's the temporary separation of our loved ones. Spiritism also helps us understand where do we / they go when we go back to the spiritual world, right? And that the communication between the two realms of existence is possible, and we may continue to be in contact with them in dreams, in inspiration, guidance. You know, we are surrounded by spirits. Part of these spirits that surround us are familiar spirits. So that grandmother that you loved and loved you when you were young and that went back to the spiritual world can be someone that is actually around you trying to help you. So that does not mean, and that's very important, because some people that start studying spiritism feel guilty when they are feeling sorrow for the loss of love of a loved one. That is a natural feeling, right? It's a natural reaction, and is actually a healthy reaction, because if someone that we love goes back to the spiritual world and we don't feel anything, either we don't really love them or there is something wrong with us, right? It is natural that we feel the separation. The problem is when this becomes an obsession, right? That after 2 years that the person has departed, we continue to be completely in turmoil because of the loss of this loved one, right? But we will address this later. But that's the problem. But again, we shouldn't feel guilty of feeling the separation, because it is natural. When we are separated from a loved one, we are going to feel it, and it's healthy, and it's healthy for us and for them, right? Because they feel what we feel on the other side. So it's important for us to address all the sides of this temporary separation or loss of loved ones, which is not really a loss. Okay? Questions?
The most important thing to address, the word loss in itself is a sorrow. It's a sorrow. For us, we can give a different meaning to this word. We can use the word.
Yeah.
But for us, we can give it a much generous idea of what that means. And it's a consolation in the spirit. And in some cases, it may even be a source of happiness. To witness a loved one going through tremendous difficulties, tremendous pain. For us, spiritists, knowing that the life continues and that individual has lived a somewhat distant life, getting rid of that physical body is actually a blessing. For us, it's easier to think in that terms.
Yeah, and there is another thing that you brought that is very important, right? we need to be less selfish with our loved ones that reach a certain age, that it is better for them to go back to the spiritual world, right? Some people are very attached to their loved ones, and they are dying, they are sick, they are suffering, they are struggling, and because of selfish things, in the end, is selfishness, they keep trying to hold these loved ones close to them. Again, we're not talking about the loss of a loved one who is young or an accident or something like that. It's, you know, we see some people that have parents that are old and they are struggling and they keep having difficulty detaching, preparing themselves to detach. Again, each one has different way of dealing with this. We are not here trying to minimize the pain. We're not here trying to minimize the struggles. We need to understand the concept, and we need to understand to look at from the spiritist point of view of us being eternal spirits, and be more prepared to deal with the separation from our loved ones when it happens. Again, we're never going to say here that someone that loses a child, a son or a daughter, that is something that you need to be prepared. Nobody's prepared for that, and nobody has the preparedness of dealing with something like that, right? That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is, when we are facing death by natural causes of our loved ones, we need to try to be less selfish and have more acceptance of the reality of the necessity of this renewal, right? Because if we get there, when we are ready for us going back to the spiritual world, if we are struggling and suffering, we want those around us to be helping us making the transition and not trying to hold us back here. Okay? All right? Questions? No? Okay.
935. What should we think of the opinion that communication with those beyond the grave is sacrilegious? There can be no desecration where there is respectful thought and sympathy, and when the communication is made with due respect. The proof of this is in the fact that the spirits who love you take pleasure in coming to you. They rejoice that you remember them, and in being able to converse with you. There would be a desecration in this communication if it were carried out in a thoughtless or trivial manner. The possibility of communicating with spirits is extremely comforting, since it gives us the means of conversing with our relatives and friends who have left this life before us. By our contact, we draw them nearer to us, and they come to hear us and reply to us. There is no longer any separation between them and us. They aid us with their guidance and assure us of how pleased they are that we remember them. We are happy to learn that they are happy, discover the details of their new existence from them, and obtain the certainty of reuniting with them one day.
Okay, so again, the question from Kardec is because the religions at that time and still today, some religions say that talking to the dead is sacrilegious, right? So of course, Kardec has to ask the spirits if talking to the spirits is what they think of the opinion. And it's funny, right? He asked the spirits what they think of us talking to them.
Should I be talking to you?
Imagine if they say answer no. That's the end of spiritism. But again, the spirits are serious, so they give a serious answer, right? Where there is a respectful thought and sympathy, and the communication is made with due respect. Again, they are implying here that we shouldn't abuse the communication with spirits, right? All those playing with Ouija boards should read this and reflect on this, right? Because if you play with inferior spirits, you run the risk of having serious consequences for you. But if the communications are done out of respect, out of desire to learn how your loved ones are on the other side, to show them that you care and you are thinking about them, of course, the communications can only be helpful. One way that a lot of people come to spiritism is because of the so-called loss of loved one, right? The other day I got a call from someone that a young lady that just lost her husband in an accident, both less than 30 years old, right? And she's not spiritist, and she was looking for help, right? She's Brazilian, of course. Brazilians is much easier to find. They know where to go, right? Just start searching the internet. But you know, spiritism cannot solve the problem, but can provide hope and consolation, right? Which is what we are here to do also, right? Of course, she wanted to receive a message from him, and I explained that that's not something that is easy. It's possible, but it's not easy, especially because he just died 15 days ago, discarnated 15 days ago. So we know that that's not that easy, but that, you know, of course, the conversation, you have to have a conversation, a positive tone, because otherwise you cannot go into the details of where or what happens, because that it's not someone that just lost a loved one and has no idea of how all this works. You cannot have a conversation that addresses, you know, the perispirit. Doesn't matter to them what is the perispirit. But again, another thing here, right? Someone asked me, another person asked me recently, right? That he said that in order to help his wife and take her to a spiritist center in Brazil, he had to tell her a white lie, right? And he's new to spiritism, so he asked me if this was a sin in spiritism. And I told him, listen, first, there's no sins in spiritism, right? There's cause and consequence. And second, when you are trying to help, available methods that sometimes you have to use, which is not really what's considered fair, right? What is a white lie? If it is with the intention of help, like here, where there is respectful thought and sympathy, you should use the available tools that you have, right? When a 4-year-old asks you about Santa Claus, are you going to say that Santa Claus does not exist? Because if you say Santa Claus exists is a lie? No, of course not, right? You are going to keep the hope and the fantasy of a child, right? So that's what the spirits are telling us here. Where there is respectful thought and sympathy, communications with the spirits, it's possible, it's welcome, and it is important for us, right? There are these places in Brazil still today that receive letters from loved ones that have departed, Chico Xavier spent the last part of his life receiving letters from loved ones that have departed, and you will read many stories of people that found comfort, found hope, and became even great workers in spiritism through the letters received by Chico Xavier, right? So how can you say that this is sacrilegious, right? Which is the question, right? If receiving a message from a loved one on the other side gives you a great deal of comfort and hope, how can it be sacrilegious, right? Doesn't make sense. Again, spiritism is reason, right? Let's use rational thought, right? It cannot be sacrilegious. On the contrary, it's comfort, right? And again, it gives us hope that we are going to be reunited with them eventually, right? Okay. Comments?
Yeah, because the talk is loss of loved ones, I think this question is directing at loved one in the spiritual world, if sacrilegious could speak with them. Naturally, it's not. But at the same time, especially for us spiritists, as in the case of this woman who is not a spiritist, to try to force a communication that is perhaps not for the best interest of both sides of one of the sides. That you may create perhaps difficulties for that spirit over there, that spirit not being in conditions to communicate at that time, and being continue being called for something that the spirit is not able to do. To be aware of that possibility, to be welcome to that possibility, but to not force a situation that perhaps will be more detrimental for both or for one of the sides.
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult. Someone that lose a loved one and doesn't know much and wants to receive a communication, to explain the technicalities of why it's not possible, it's not the best way of talking. It's just you need to talk in terms of hope, in terms of difficulty of that the communication. Chico Xavier used to say that the phone rings from there to here, not from here to there, right? You cannot ask whoever you want, and the one that you want will communicate, because we don't know in which situation they are there. We always like to use André Luiz as an example, right? Because first he told us his whole story and a lot of his struggles in the spiritual world, and his mother that was in a better place than him. But on the other hand, we meet his grandfather in the book, In the Greater World, right? So that loved him very much. He was the only one that cared for him and he cared for. Imagine if André Luiz wanted to receive a communication from the grandfather. We don't know because he doesn't say, but when the grandfather went back to the spiritual world, maybe André Luiz, I don't know, I think he was a child or a young man when the grandfather went back to the spiritual world. He wants to receive a communication from the grandfather. The grandfather is in no condition of giving the communication until André Luiz goes back to the spiritual world, goes visit the grandfather. So many years later, and the grandfather is still there struggling, right? So, but again, that's not something we can tell people that recently lost a loved one, right? Because sometimes the communication comes. And one thing that is also very important is sometimes the communication does not come directly from the loved one, but someone in the name of the loved one will bring the communication because you are deserving of receiving news, right? You may receive through a communication, you may receive it in dream, right? You can dream with a loved one that in reality is someone that is present in your dream in the name of that loved one, because that loved one is in no condition. But you are going to see the loved one there because it's helpful for both of you, right? So there are many ways of us communicating with them. When we think about them out of nowhere, you know, for instance, a grandparent we lost like 30 years ago, and out of nowhere, suddenly you think about your grandmother. Why did I think of her? She's around. You have to be open to that possibility. She's trying to connect with you. So we send our love, we send our happy thoughts, we open ourselves to receive the inspiration and guidance. Sometimes we're dealing with problems, with a difficult problem, and then we remember of our grandmother, and then you know, we find a solution for the problem. Again, maybe the grandmother there helping us. So there are many ways that they will be connected and around us to try to help us and guide us. Okay. Okay. Right.
936.
Yes, sir.
What effect does the inconsolable sorrow of survivors have upon spirits who are the object of that sorrow? A spirit is touched by the memory and regrets of those it has loved. However, persistent and unreasonable sorrow is painful because, in excessive grief, it sees a lack of faith in the future and confidence in God. Consequently, this ends up being an obstacle to advancement and perhaps even to their reunion. For a spirit who is happier than it was on earth, to regret its state is to regret its happiness. Let us take the example of two friends who are prisoners locked up in the same prison. Both of them will be free one day, but one is released before the other. Would it be kind on the part of the one who remains to regret that the other leaves sooner? Would there not be more selfishness than affection when one wants another to remain captive and suffering in the same circumstance as oneself? The same is true with two individuals who love one another on earth. If one leaves first, the other should rejoice while patiently awaiting for his or her own freedom. We may illustrate this subject by means of another comparison. You have a friend whose circumstances result in a painful existence, although he or she remains physically close to you. Thus, your friend's health or interests require a change to another country, where he or she will be better off in every respect. However, your friend will no longer be near you at every moment, but will still keep contact with you. The separation between you will only be in your daily life. Should you grieve for the loss of physical contact, considering it is for your friend's own good? Spiritism gives us clear proof of a future life and its presence around us, as well as the continued affection of people we love and the relationships we are able to keep. Spiritism offers us the greatest consolation for the most painful of human sorrows. Spiritism eliminates loneliness and abandonment because friends with whom one can hold affectionate conversation always surround the most isolated of human beings. We are often impatient with the trials and tribulations of life. They seem so intolerable that we sometimes believe that we cannot endure them. Yet, if we face them with courage, and if we are able to silence our complaints, We will rejoice in the remembrance of the experience when we are finished our human existence, the same way that that patient rejoices when they recover after completing a painful course of treatment that has cured the disease.
Okay. So here we're talking about, the question is about the inconsolable sorrow of survivors that lost a loved one, right? And we have to divide, we touched this, we have to divide in two parts, right? First, the recent loss of a loved one, right? It's natural to be touched, as they say, by the memory and regrets of those he has loved. It's interesting because the memory and regrets in Portuguese is not regrets, and then I went to original in French, and it is regrets. So meaning you are here and you feel guilty for things that you haven't done with the loved one, that haven't done or haven't said to the loved one that has departed, right? This is your regrets, right? So if you know, you lost, let's go with a grandmother, and you think, oh, I should have told her that I love her more often, she's going to receive these feelings in a positive way, right? The memory, she's going to receive in a positive way. The problem is, as they say here, persistent and unreasonable sorrow is painful because it keeps that spirit connected to us, and it prevents them or makes it difficult for them to move on, right? Because there is something hanging there, right? Because a spirit goes back to the spiritual world, right? After a period of recovery, readjustment that takes, it's different for each spirit, but for all of them, it happens. You get to a point that they have to live, they have to continue their journey. They have to live life in the spirit, back in the spiritual world, right? Do whatever they are supposed to do there. And for each one of us is a different thing that we need to address, our learning, our work in the spiritual world, many things. If you have someone that is still holding on to you through their thoughts and their pain, it can cause you pain also. It can cause you, it makes it difficult for you to move on in the spiritual world because, right, when you are next to someone that is suffering here alone, and you feel their pain, and you feel empathy for them, right? And you want to help, and you don't know how to help. It's the same thing they feel on the other side, with the difference that their possibility of helping is limited, right? Because they can send loving thoughts back to us, but if we are closed in our suffering and our sorrow, we cannot even receive these loving vibrations because we close ourselves to it, because we are so focused on our suffering. So that's what they're talking about if we carry on with this pain, right? And again, there are cases and cases, right? You lose a child, it will take much longer, and you'll never overcome in your, most of parents that lose children will never be able to completely overcome. It's something that you carry with you, right? It's natural, it's part of life. But if you lose your 90-year-old mother, went back to the spiritual world, and after 3 years, you're still, you know, suffering and struggling to move on because you lost your mother, something is wrong with you, right? You need to be better able to deal with this, these feelings, because you need to go to treatment or something like that. That's what the spirits are telling us here, right? So healthy, feeling sorrow and feeling pain with the separation, healthy, yes. As to and again, I'm not going to say it's 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. Each one is different, and each person and each loss is different. What the spirits are telling us here is you have to reach a point where your life moves on, and you have to move on with your life, carrying the memory, carrying the good remembrance of the loved one, but life goes on for them and for us. We need to move on. That's what they're saying here. On the comment by Kardec, the translation here in English was wrong, so I corrected. For a spirit was happier than it was on earth. For us to regret its state is to regret its happiness. So it's for us, someone that is happy, and we are regretting the separation, we are causing them more harm than good, right? Because they are happier in the spiritual world, because they are free from whatever they were struggling here, especially those that died after a long disease or some of pain. They will be better in the spiritual world. And for us to carry this pain and carrying these sorrows and regrets, it's only going to cause them harm and causing us harm. And then Kardec gives 2 examples here, right? You are in a prison with someone, and this other prisoner is living before you, and you feel unhappy because you are left behind. This is selfishness, right? This is a selfish act. Or someone that has, it's funny when he talks here about moving to another country. At that time, moving to another country means communicating through letters that took us 3 weeks, 3 months to arrive, right? So it was difficult communication. Nowadays, it's, we connect with them through FaceTime or through other things. So that example is much less relevant nowadays. But at the time of Kardec, you need to understand that separation from someone that moved to another place was really a separation. And it was a good comparison to losing someone, because it was a temporary separation or a definite separation, but not forever, right? Because eventually we are all reunited in the spiritual world, right? And again, Kardec talks about how Spiritism helps us, giving us the proof of a future life, right? So if you are studying Spiritism, you understand that there is a future life, that we are eternal spirits, that the separation is temporary. You have all the tools to prepare yourself to deal with this temporary separation with the loved ones. Of course, having the tools is not the same thing as putting in practice when you are dealing with the situation, and each one of us are going to deal differently. And the fact that you know these things doesn't guarantee that you are not going to enter into despair, that you are going to struggle a lot. And we've seen Spiritists struggling a lot, right? The other day I was watching one of these lives, and it hasn't much to do with this, but it has something related to this. And this lady asks that, she says that she has been studying Spiritism, and that she's been Spiritist for a very long time, but she had an emergency surgery, and she found out that she's really scared of dying. She wasn't prepared to have those feelings, and how could she better prepare herself to deal with it? Which I found it very interesting, right? Because when we are faced with the situation is when we're really going to see how much we really internalize what we have learned, or if it's only in our minds, but it hasn't gone to our hearts, right? So Spiritism gives us the tools, but we have to make them become part of who we are. And that can only, again, it's not like the imperfections that we can work on a daily basis to improve and to overcome. This type of situation we will only see when we are faced with the situation, right? Because we cannot know how we are going to react if we are not losing any loved one or having a death close to us. But we need to reflect on that. And the more we study, the more we understand about the other side, what happens to the other side, the different places we can find ourselves in the spiritual world, the different places our loved ones can find themselves in the spiritual world, the better we'll be prepared to deal with it. It won't be a guarantee, but better we'll be prepared. And at least when we face, if we find ourselves struggling more than we should, we know that we have to try to control ourselves, try to be more aware of everything that we learned. Okay? Questions, comments? We finished loss of loved ones, right? Not many questions today. Not a single question today. Okay, there is one question. Thank you.
What about when a loved one dies and we think that maybe this person is not happy, like if they didn't believe in God or did some wrong things in life? Is there anything that we can do? I don't know, praying or
To help them?
to try to help? Yeah, because
Pray.
probably we will get this information, so we can just hope that this person is happy. But if they're not, if they're like struggling.
Yeah, we always have to pray, right? And the prayer, how does prayer help someone that is struggling there, right? When you are struggling and you are in pain, prayer is like a medicine that alleviates your pain, that soothes your pain. Again, not all spirits there are going to be able to benefit from it, because let's say someone that is focused on causing harm or obsessing or are in the lower zones, like in the book Liberation that we just studied, the prayer is not going to have an immediate effect on them, because they close themselves to receive that help because they are so much focused on what they are doing. But the prayer is never lost. It's there. And it helps us more than it helps them in that case. But whenever they open the window just a little bit, the prayer penetrates there, and it may be the key to allow them to receive the help that they need. So prayer always helps. Prayer always is of great value always, even if it cannot have immediate effects. And again, the more you study Spiritism and looking at people, the more you are able to imagine where they are going to be, right? Which is good and bad sometimes. Good on one side, bad on other, because sometimes you look at some loved ones that you see that they are going to face challenges there in the spiritual world. So when we know that, we have to pray more, but we have to understand also that everyone will find help and assistance at some point. We will be assisted, and maybe we will be able to help and assist them when we are back in the spiritual world, like André Luiz has done with so many spirits. So more reason for us to better prepare ourselves to be of assistance to our loved ones that we may find in difficult situations there. Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Philip. Our time is up. Next week, we go to ingratitude, disappointment, shattered affections. Okay? So, for those that missed last Saturday's presentation, it was very interesting, that she talked about sleep and dreams. It was a very good talk. You still can catch on the SDNY YouTube page. This Saturday, Bernadette Leal from California is going to give us a lecture, The Next Step of Gratitude. She says that each day presents us with a chance to embrace gratitude simply by observing the world around us. However, true gratitude transcends mere words of thank you. Are you prepared to take the next stride on this journey? So that's Saturday, 11 a.m. through the United States Spiritist Federation YouTube page, Facebook page, and the International Spiritist Council YouTube page also. This Sunday, it's our 4th Sunday of the month, so we'll be doing the Q&A session. Please bring your questions. We already have some interesting ones, and we will address all of your questions also. We're getting closer to the reopening of our book club on Wednesdays. Mid-August, we are going back to the book club on Wednesday at 7 p.m. And I think that's it, right? Yes. Okay. Carol, can you do our final prayer?
Sure. Thank you very much, John and Elmo and Philip. Thank you for reading, and thank you for everyone who is participating. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we give thanks once again for the opportunity to be together for our studies of the Spirit Book, topics being relative happiness and unhappiness, also the loss of loved ones. We live on a planet of trials and atonements. Effort is needed to overcome pride, greed, vanity, envy, anger, and excessive attachments to the material things of this world. May we honestly take stock of ourselves. What are we creating? What are we manifesting with our thoughts and actions? Are we creating happiness or are we creating unhappiness? We are eternal spirits associated with a physical body. All things must pass. We will experience loss and separation of family members and loved ones, most certainly. Prayers can assist and be vital to those who are suffering from the death of a loved one, and especially helpful to those who have departed physically from our world. We are truly grateful for the Spiritist guidance. We give thanks to the spiritual benefactors and the good spirits for guiding and inspiring us this evening. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us. For our loved ones, our teachers, the directors, the counselors, the mediums, the workers, and those who are participating. We pray for inner peace, and especially now for world peace, and for those who are suffering in the physical world as well as the spiritual worlds. We pray for SGNY, our center, and all Spiritist centers throughout the world, that they may grow, that they may thrive, expand, and be protected at all times. As we close, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to family, friends, loved ones, and co-workers. May we remind ourselves to go forth now as beacons of love, of light, of peace, of charity and service. So be it.